Immortal Unchained is a sci-fi action game that tries to blend the gameplay mechanics of a Dark Souls-like game with some of the sort of environment and lore, especially of something like Destiny. And in the end, it's a mishmash of ideas that have been implemented much better elsewhere. And the game, at least on the Xbox One, which I reviewed it on, looks drab and the environment's completely devoid of any sort of interest in life. And that part there, I want to kick off with why this game sort of, to me, isn't exactly worth investing or any of your time in. And that's because games like, especially Dark Souls and even Destiny to a much lesser extent, is the gameplay and sort of the world itself. It tells so much story in where you visit and sort of all the little things you find within there. From downed enemies to sort of broken buildings, and even something as small as things laid on the ground can tell you so much about the world and its past and why it's maybe have gotten to where it is today. And Mortal Unchained doesn't exactly do that. You traverse different areas, something like you'd actually have seen in From Software's previous game Demon Souls, where you sort of have this hub area and you go through portals to a new world. And each one, it does visually look fairly different. They introduce new enemies each time, but it doesn't really change things up enough to feel like it's worth it. As you explore each area, which they aren't particularly big, you will find some shortcuts along the way, but don't expect anything intrinsic or as complicated as something like a Dark Souls game. It all feels like you take sort of all those aspects and sort of half it, and you kind of get a better idea of what it is. It's like you take a little bit and you try a little bit, but ultimately it just doesn't work. And essentially the gameplay is you go around an area, you face like enemies like you can see on the screen, but everything is done with ranged weaponry as opposed to melee, which you may be used to. And while in the beginning that seems like it might be a cool thing to do, the fact that you can free aim, the free aim isn't it isn't very responsive, or it doesn't feel that smooth. However, there is a lock on, and once you use the lock on, there's really no use to using the free aim, because when you're trying to free aim hit an enemy from far away, for the most part your bullet just like never reaches the enemy, and that's just absolutely it's just frustrating. You have traps laid around, but they're mostly just sort of vine traps that keep you held in place, or shock traps that keep you in place. The enemies don't exactly do anything particularly interesting. One of the cool aspects of these types of games is understanding when they're going to attack, their range of attacks, their fluid and their motions to it, and just don't feel it here. The animation and all just doesn't feel as good either. I have to say, when I was playing this game, there was one game that jumped to my mind. It's not really because of the gameplay, but just because of kind of how it looks, how it approaches things, and sort of how it seems like it wants to be such a big, expansive thing, but just will never get there. So it reminded me of Too Human in that sense. And if you don't remember Too Human, it was this game that was built up to have so many incredible things that would be the best game ever, and ultimately it ended up coming out being an okay game, and actually you can't even buy it anymore due to legal reasons. It was just a complete failure. And it was like, I'm not saying that Immortal Unchained is a complete failure, it just doesn't succeed in what it wants to become. It's not even a particularly long game. The challenge isn't exactly like what you expect. Like these games, like the Souls games, as I keep referring to, you were expected to sort of die and revisit these areas over and over again. And here you just don't. The challenge just isn't there as much. I finished this game, I think, in under 10 hours. And that's sort of the thing as well, is when you move around from area to area, things start to change a little bit in its visual style and identity, and that just doesn't happen here. It just kind of feels the same each area from beginning to the end and all the way back that you go. It just doesn't feel like it's diverse enough within those regions. The regions themselves are different enough, but ultimately it's just not where it could have been. I don't know if they'll have another crack at it. but it's just not where it should be for it to be worth a purchase. Like every little time there's this little glimmer of what it could potentially be, maybe someday, or if they ever do a sequel, or if they take what they learned and moved it into something else. There's a little glimmer of something there, but it's not enough to shine and take your attention away from anything else.